Welcome to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, I'd like to draw your attention to something very important and something that can be painful if you forget about it. Imagine you played a good game, you gained a significant advantage, for example, being a rook or a queen ahead, or both of them. You're about to win. You're kind of choosing, should I win this way or should I win that way? And all of a sudden, the game slips out of your hand. Your opponent saves the game. Well, one of the ways that can happen if you forgot about the opportunity for stalemate. But what is stalemate? Stalemate is a special situation that's neither a check and it's neither checkmate. It's a situation when the king or none of the other pieces can move. We'll see plenty of the examples in a minute, but I just want to describe it. It's a situation when the king has no legal move, but neither does any of the other pieces of the same side. Well, let me show you right away in some specific examples. And here we go. This is a very typical example where there is only one pawn for white in addition to the kings, and white is about to promote that pawn. Typically, when a pawn reaches the other end of the board, that is the 8th rank from white's perspective, we would want to replace that pawn, the queen, as the queen is the most valuable piece and typically the piece that's easiest to checkmate our opponent with. However, there can be exceptions to that, and you will see a number of them in this lesson. In this particular case, if white indeed would move the pawn to the 8th rank and advance it and promote it to a queen, the resulting situation would end the game with stalemate. Look at this situation. The black king on a7 has no moves because if it would move to any neighboring square, it would move into an attack. However, another very important element to that is to make sure the king is not in direct attack, because if it would be, that means it would be a checkmate. However, the big difference between a stalemate and a checkmate is that while in checkmate the king is directly being attacked, when it comes to stalemate, the king is not being attacked, and therefore this is a stalemate situation, a very lucky escape from black's perspective. A sad moment for white. A game that pretty much has been in white's hand has been spoiled, and each side would receive in a tournament half a point. They would split the point. Looking at the situation, that would clearly favor black. Let's go back, because what I'd like to do in this lesson is not just to recognize what stalemate is or what the bad move is, but also how to do better and how not to fall into this trap. In this situation, there are two ways to deal with the problem. One is the so-called under-promotion. Under-promotion means that even though you have the opportunity to promote your pawn to the most valuable piece, the queen, you choose to, for a good reason, to rather promote it to a lower value piece, which namely can be a rook, in some rare cases even a bishop or knight. So one option is, based on this explanation, the pawn promoting and being replaced by a rook. In this case, it's the objectively very best move because black has only one legal move left, moving the king to a6, which immediately would allow the checkmate from the corner. On the other hand, I'd like to point out another important method, which is very simple, even though it would take longer to win the game with that. And that move would be to make sure to give some breathing air for the black king by moving our king away, however guaranteeing that on the following move our pawn will get promoted to a queen, and then by a simple technique, king and queen versus king will win the game. So if you want to win quick, the optimal move is promote the pawn to a rook in this position, or if you by any chance forget about it, the simple way to win is to play king d7 and then promote the pawn to a queen and eventually checkmate, although this will take a whole lot longer than promoting the pawn to a rook. Let's see a few other examples to this same theme. Here we go. In this scenario, again, it is very crucial that you recognize that the most natural move, which is to advance the pawn from b7 to b8, and if you promote that pawn to a queen, again, the end result is stalemate. When the game is stalemated, the game is over, and each side splits the points, get half a point. Again, looking from the white side, that's not good news. Looking from the black side, that's a lucky half a point because black was about to lose the game. Again, here, just as in the previous example, white has two methods to win the game, a quicker one and a slower but also secure one. One method is to move our king, making sure the black king no longer will be in the stalemate situation, and then promote the pawn to a queen. Nothing wrong with that. For example, white may move the king anywhere. Any of the legal moves with the white king would not ruin our chances to win and could be followed by the white pawn promoting to a queen. The most ideal of those moves is to bring the king to g3 and then after king g1 promote the pawn to a queen. However, that is not the fastest way to accomplish our goal, because our ultimate goal is to checkmate black's king. To get our pawn promoted to a queen is only a road to get there. So in order to checkmate the fastest way we can, again white should under-promote, namely to a rook. Now, the h2 square is free for black's king, therefore we're not talking about stalemate, and when the black king indeed moves to h2, the white rook can swing over to the corner to h8 and announce checkmate to black's king. Let's move on and see a bit more complex examples. The reason why it's more complex, because it involves more and different pieces on the board. Here, in addition to white's pawn, white also has already an existing queen. Remember, whenever one side still has a queen on the board, it does not restrict you from promoting another pawn to another queen. That means ultimately, theoretically, it doesn't really happen in practical games, but theoretically, you could have up to 9 queens of the same color on the board simultaneously at the same time. However, there is absolutely no need ever to do that. Typically, if you have 1 or 2 queens, it's more than sufficient to decide the game to your favor. Now, in this situation, if white would not have his queen on the board, white would happily promote his pawn on the A file to a queen. However, the situation here is different. Here, if white would promote the pawn and make a second queen, that would mean that the black king again has no square to go to where one of the white pieces would not capture it. Therefore, since the black king is not directly attacked, the game is stalemate. It's draw. Again, the method is the same, and that's why I'd like to point out that it's much more important for you to remember the methods, the patterns, rather than specific positions. On the most part, chess is based on pattern recognition and not memorization of specific positions. Here again, the situation is, step number 1, you need to recognize the danger of stalemate. Number 2, you need to look for ways to make sure it's not going to be stalemate. There are 2 ways to accomplish that. One is the longer way, when you simply make a move, making sure the stalemate danger will be gone. One move, for example, to that effect would be just move your king away, and now all of a sudden you'll see the black king will have plenty of squares to go to. So we're very far from being in danger of stalemate. On the other hand, if you're trying to win real quick, again, the quicker method to accomplish that is to make sure you promote your pawn to a bishop this time. Of course, you could promote it to a rook as well, avoiding stalemate, but it takes just a bit longer to end the game that way than promoting to a bishop. Right now, black only has one legal move, moving the king to a6, and again, white is ready to checkmate. Very nice. Let's move on to examples where both sides have more than one piece. Remember I mentioned in the beginning that when we are talking about stalemate, it means that none of our pieces or our opponent's pieces should be able to move. So for example, right now, if white would make a move like king a5, which is not a bad move at all, we are not talking about any kind of stalemate. Black, first of all, can move his king or could move their pawn to g4. So when black or one side has at least one legal move or more, the game is never ever stalemate. Now, on the other hand, it's important to recognize that white's most natural move, which would be to capture the hanging pawn on g5, would be a major mistake. Why would that be? Because all of a sudden, white has captured black's mobile pawn. It's no longer on the board, and black's only other pawn on h7 has no moves because of white's pawn blocking it on h6. Also, because the white rook has just moved to g5, the black king all of a sudden has been cornered and has no place to go. Generally, it's not a bad thing, however, not in a situation when black does not have any piece whatsoever that can move. So therefore, rook takes pawn in this position would be a major blunder. You should do anything but that. What that means is that you can make any move and still accomplish your goal. In this case, considering that the black king already has been cornered, the ideal way to win is, the quickest way to win is to make sure the king will not get out of that cornered position, and white's most ideal move is to play king e5. Then, let's say black plays g4. Again, we have to make sure we do not hurry up and capture that pawn on g4, because if the white rook would move, capture on g4, the game immediately would be stalemate again. Therefore, a much better move would be moving the king to f6. Again, black still has several choices of moves. A last trick that black can try, play g3. in hopes that white would finally capture the pawn, again resulting in stalemate. But obviously white by no means is forced to accept this gift. In fact, white shouldn't, and white has many winning moves in this position. White has 5 equally good moves. And anywhere basically moving the rook along the first rank from E1 to D1 or C1 or B1 or A1, they are equally good, accomplishing the same purpose, that is to put the rook on an open file, and then regardless what black's response is, whether it's king G8 or pushing the pawn ahead, the answer will be the same. The rook appears on the 8th rank and it's game over. Black is checkmated. As we can see, in contrary to the stalemate situations right now, the black king is directly attacked by white's rook and therefore it's game over. Let's move on to our next example. And here we go. Here we have a whole bunch of pieces. And again, the first thing you would look at, what can you capture for free? But it's really important that you don't capture first and then look around. It's always absolutely crucial when you play chess to first look, evaluate the circumstances, and then accordingly make your choice of move. Right now, in this position, white's most natural move, which is to capture the black bishop, would be a major mistake, because all of a sudden, the resulting position is stalemate. The white bishop, by capturing black's bishop, now controls the h8 square, and therefore the black king has no legal moves. In this position, there are many ways to win the game, and other than giving your queen up right away, bishop takes bishop is the only way to mess up the game. The best way to win is to simply first give a check with the queen, and when the king moves, then already white is not only safe to capture the bishop, but in fact end the game with checkmating black's king. Let's move on to our next example. Here we go. In this position, white is a pawn ahead. In fact, white has the opportunity to capture a second pawn. But always be very careful, especially when there are few pieces left. You always need to watch out for stalemate dangers. For example, in this position, after king would take the pawn on f6, what do you see? We see a stalemate situation because it's black's turn and black has no legal moves at his disposal. Forget plural, not even one single one. Even if black would have just one legal move, we would be not talking about stalemate. But here we are, because black has no moves, while his king is not being directly attacked. So now we know what not to do, but what should we do? Well, again, it's almost that situation, anything but that. Well, what white should be doing is, white should be simply advancing his passed pawn on the queen side by playing b4. Now black has only one legal move, king g7, and now white can continue focusing on his passed pawn on the b file, keep advancing it, and then, in 3 more moves, promote it to a new queen. Always be aware, make sure you're not resulting in stalemate with your upcoming move. In this case, the black king is far too far to reach in time to capture the new white queen. White is in a winning situation. Let's move on. Here we go. In this position, white has a queen and pawn versus black's rook and pawn. Obviously, that is a major material advantage. In fact, white is able to capture black's pawn immediately if they choose to. However, I'd like to point out these type of tricks that can happen in positions with few pieces left on the board. Right now, the black king has been cornered. And because it's unfortunate position for white, the black king now is stuck, has no legal moves. However, we're not talking about stalemate at the moment because black still has a rook as well. And as long as I said any of the pieces can move of the same color, the game is not stalemate. However, in this case, black comfortably can give that rook up by giving a check to white's king. If the white king captures, then indeed the position is stalemate. Or if white does not capture, black will keep giving these checks, forcing white to sooner or later capture the rook. You may wonder why. Well, the rule of chess is that if you keep reaching the same position 3 times, the same exact position 3 times, your opponent can claim a draw. So therefore, the game will be a draw either by stalemate, or if white insists in avoiding the stalemate, the game will be draw by repetition of moves, or rather by pre-fold repetition, which means the same exact position has arisen 3 times. So this is a draw. Let's move on and see a very similar example. Here we go. It seems like there are quite a few pieces on the board, which is true, but white needs to be careful not to get tempted by capturing the pawn on b4. This would be a major mistake because again, black would get the opportunity to get rid of his only piece that can move at the moment by giving the rook up, and even if white does not choose to capture the rook immediately, black will simply move back and forth until either the same position will be reached 3 times, or indeed white captures the rook, and then the game is stalemate. Again, going back to this position, what should white do? Well, almost anything but capturing that pawn. For example, a good choice would be to move the rook to h1 and offer an exchange of rooks. It's clear that white's material advantage, extra rook and pawn, gives white the winning chances. Let's move on to our next example. Here we go. In this position, it's white's turn, and white has the opportunity to capture another black pawn, namely by pawn takes pawn. However, what you need to recognize is that now the black king has no moves. So all black needs to do is to get rid of his only piece that can move, his pawn, and they can indeed promote the pawn to a queen. If now king takes queen, then it's stalemate. And of course, it would be even a whole lot worse not to capture black's queen, in which case black would get the winning material advantage. King g1, stalemate. So what should white do instead? Well, white wants to make sure that they keep at least a pawn on the board. As we know, a king and knight is not a winning advantage against the king. So therefore, white must make sure to keep the pawn on the board. And then, for example, king g7, white advances the pawn further, and white's pawn is unstoppable. White's pawn will promote on the next move. And here is our last example of this lesson. Here we go. Black carelessly has just moved down his rook to e1. What's the threat? Well, black is about to give checkmate with rook c1. This looks like a hopeless situation for white. And nevertheless, thanks to the stalemate pattern, White can get out of trouble and save the game. Try to figure out on your own, what should White do right now? Well, the solution is needing to give up the queen. Black captures, but now White still has a mobile pawn. Well, but the pawn can advance to g6, and now whether Black captures the pawn or moves out of the check elsewhere, White will have no legal moves left, and therefore the game ends in a draw with stalemate. Well, I hope after this lesson you'll be better in avoiding stalemates, and maybe you'll save some hopelessly looking games once in a while. Thank you for listening, and be back next week for some more chess advice. Take care.